making us write?
Just with the function say hello. And then just those 4 functions.
Oh, he's making us.
Yep, 9 to 32.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Anything with the pound sign before it's not code anyway, it's just comments. It's not going to run.
You want me to type the comments?
The comments are optional. C functions say nothing at all, which was written especially for you, Bly.
No, that should have been a function, what Max should say.
What if?
That's a good phrase.
All right, so we're at 6:10. I'm just going to get going here. My name is Jacob Kratt. I work for Aurora, now Advocate Aurora Healthcare here in Milwaukee. Today we're just going to take a really introductory look at PowerShell modules and take a look at the agenda here. I can full screen this, but I don't want to. So initially we're gonna create a very simple module of our own. From that point, we're gonna take a step back. In June, we talked about creating functions for Active Directory and things like that. So we're gonna take a look at those functions and how to make a module there with a few more advanced techniques. We're gonna talk a little bit about advanced functions and why they're important, especially if you're considering making a module. And then we're going to actually create our first module from those Active Directory functions. So that'll be demoing a non-monolithic module. Has anyone besides Bly or Paul even heard of that before? What was that, August? I think we were out to eat on the east side in August, and Paul was like, yeah, I just came back from this meetup down south, and we're talking about non-monolithic modules like it was a thing that we would know. It wasn't a thing that we knew. But I'm going to demo that because having to sort of prep for this class, I started taking some of the work that I have at work and sort of refitting it into the non-monolithic standards. So we'll at least take a look at that. So if we have this code and we've saved it in that location as a PSM1 file, we should be, and I want to show you guys this environment PS module path. I'm going to make that a little prettier. Split. All the paths that you guys see here are the paths within Windows that PowerShell is going to look for module files. So if you have a module or a PSM1 file and you put it in those directories in the right way, it's going to find your modules. So we'll take a look at the file structure now. Again, we have this PC documents, Windows PowerShell modules demo module. And that's just our PSM1 file. I'm going to import that module. And once you have this saved and everything is ready to go, you should be able to tab complete that demo module. Just going to do that. Okay, so we notice that this initial warning tells us that we're not using the approved verb noun format, and we're not. Say is not an approved PowerShell verb. If you really want to figure out what the approved verbs are, you can just type in get verb, and I'll sort it alphabetically. But that's how you can figure out what the approved verbs are. It doesn't matter too much what the nouns are per se, but let's take a look at that module. So we can see that it's there, it's loaded. We can even get the commands for it. Get command module, demo module, and there it is. Right? That was super easy, right? I mean, you guys created a module in what, a couple minutes. And we could even run commands from it. Say nothing at all. And we can see that we have right now this TS function, which is all it's doing is getting the date. It's just timestamping everything else, so you have a nice sort of interdependency within the module itself. So I have code down here for an additional function that's just called getNothing. So I'm going to overwrite that PSM1 file, and then I'm going to re-import it. So I'm going to remove not that. I didn't want to do that. Okay, so we have, if we come take a look at the PSM1 file, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 functions. But when we go to export the commands, we're only seeing 3. And the reason that is right here, export module number. It's only exporting the functions that meet this criteria. So and we'll talk a little bit later how you can adjust this in your module manifest file. But when I first started creating a module myself, this was actually how I exported it. So you generally, when you're creating a module, if you have functions that are private or not public, things that you don't want exported, this could be a method that you could use. What I did is any function that actually had a dash in it would be exported. Anything else would just be considered a private or a helper function. Does that make sense? That was a pretty easy way to go about it and kind of track the code as that was going on. And as I sort of progressed and learned a little more, there are different ways to accommodate that, and we'll touch on that. So everyone feel good? I mean, your first module there, awesome. Does it make sense? Any questions so far?
So the functions are still available there. Just the export module member will just show the.
Yeah. So if I
the functions that you have access to.
if I change this to that, that's going to give me every function with a dash in it, which means that this timestamp function isn't going to be exported. Which is actually, you should never name a function that unless it's like really, really private. I mean, that's a really, really bad function name. And even if you are, you definitely don't want to export it because then you're just you're asking for a lot of trouble.
But all the functions in there can access that TS function even though it's not exported.
Right, right, and that's the benefit of having a private function or a helper function.
See it, but it's still there for the function.
Correct. All right, I'm going to go back to the agenda here. All right, so I'll ask the question, why make a module in the first place? Now, a lot of you, I don't know, I haven't met, I don't know what you guys do when you go to work every day, how much you know PowerShell, but I would ask, potentially 3 questions. Are you writing PowerShell code that you're going to use more than once? Is your code too complex to be one simple script? And could that code ever be deployed somewhere for somebody else to use? And if you're answering yes to those questions, you should probably consider just creating a module. That way you can not only have those commands ready for export, but ready to share as well. So next we're going to talk about advanced functions, and then I'm going to give some examples from the AD class from back in June. Yeah, I know this is kind of a jerk move to put all this text like that in a PowerShell or a PowerPoint slide. Especially if you just type help about underscore function underscore advanced, it's copied right from that. So use the help, it's there, just use the shell. It's right there, and really all advanced functions are is parameterized PowerShell scripts. So let me get out of that, and then we'll take a look at some of those advanced functions. So So right here we have a function for creating AD users en masse. We see that we have parameters. We have a parameter here that's mandatory. It's called import file. So all this function is doing is it's just going to accept a CSV file, and then it's going to create users based on the data in the file. Because you need a file, that parameter has to be mandatory, right? We have a function here for creating AD groups en masse, getting AD group members, adding AD group members, and you can see a couple of these have a couple functions of their own. So what I'm going to do, and Paul, don't yell at me for not prepping this before. Part of this is just kind of showing how you would go about doing this. We potentially have someone who's going to speak sometime in the next couple months to talk about more advanced ways of taking your code or the scripts that you have in your scripts folder and compiling them in a module in a more automated fashion. We're not going to do that here, so I'm going to show you the dirty way to do it. And then we're going to go from there. So I'm just going to take this code, and I'm going to just paste my functions into it. Again, I don't need this underlying code because that's just calling the existing function. And now that I have all my functions there in one file, just like we did before, so obviously it's a little more advanced code than just saying hello and goodbye. But I'm going to save as. I'm just going to create a folder called demo80 module. In my modules folder, again, remember that PS module path. Right, that's important. You got to put your modules there, and you're going to name your module the same. So PSM1. So I hope that worked. Port module. What did I call that? Demo80 module. GCM. GCM is short for get command. And there we go. There are all the commands that I just put together in a PSM1 file. I created a folder and I put that PSM1 file there. And now my commands are available via module. I don't have to call a script. I don't have to do anything. I can just run that code right from the module. So what are we missing? Anybody? Dan, what are we missing? What do we need to make this module whole?
CSV.
No. We're missing a pretty key component, and that's a manifest file. From the manifest file, you can establish or instantiate your versions, instantiate what command list you want to be exported. There's a lot of things. So let me cd demo module manifest. Oh, let me do this, because this is how I learned how to do it from a video on YouTube from Don Jones. Let's do show command, type new module manifest. And what's really nice about show command is it will give you that nice little GUI you can just fill out. Right, so we know the path. Because I changed directory already to the path where I know the manifest is going to go, it lives in the same folder as the PSM1 file. Demo, and you're going to name it the same exact thing. I'm just going to call it demo80 module PSD1. Again, you can export aliases, you can instantiate an author. The parameters that are mandatory, you'll see the asterisk next to them. So obviously you need a path because it needs to create a file. But there's a lot of things you can instantiate, like PowerShell. What version of PowerShell do you need to run this module? Required modules. So if right now this module requires Active Directory to load, you can put it there. That way, when it loads, also load Active Directory. I'm not going to do that because I don't have AD on this computer, and when I try to load it, it'll break. Scripts to process when it loads, variables to export. Make sure I got everything here. And again, I'm walking through this process this way. I know it's a little clumsy, but I just want to walk you guys through the process of how, if and when you guys go to work tomorrow and you want to try this on your own, you can do it.
I think I missed it when you did the first, not this one, not this set of modules, but
Yeah.
the first one. I don't remember the manifest part. So why are we?
I
doing
didn't. That's because it was a very basic way of doing it. So now I'm showing
okay.
the more advanced way. I wanted to start the movie in the middle, and then rebuild to another climax. Oh, you failed me. All right.
It's supposed to be PSD1 or PDS1?
It's supposed to be, thank you. PS. I think it probably wants quotes. There we go. So let's take a look at the folder. And it's not there.
You're in the wrong folder.
Am I in the wrong folder?
Yeah.
Oh. Thank you.
Anytime, Jake.
All right, so I'm going to open that. We'll take a look at what that actually looks like. So again, there's a lot of things that you can specify within the manifest file in and of itself that sort of makes that module whole. It adds a lot of functionality to it.
So when you import the module, does it use that manifest file to load what it needs from the PS1, the module file, or?
Right, right. So now it's going to actually load from the manifest first.
So it loads the manifest first, grabs what it needs, and then you have your module.
Right, and one of the key elements of having a manifest file is you can instantiate versioning.
Yep.
I know we talked at the last meetup about Git and using tools like that. If you're not using versioning, it's probably not going to help you a whole lot because you're not really going to know how to. You might have a harder time rolling your code back. It's a lot easier to just remove the existing production version of the module than it is having to go back and replace a bunch of code, using diffs in Git. So I'm going to do this. You guys have any questions so far?
Why am I getting a security warning? What are you doing?
Ha!
Something with that. Well, I was trying to import that demo module. And it says security warning, run all these scripts that you trust. Well, scripts
Yeah.
useful.
Execution policy.
Yeah.
Your execution policy is set to not have fun.
Yeah. So is it Darnell? So if you do this, now for this you have to be running PowerShell as admin or it's not going to work. But if you open PowerShell as admin and you run set execution policy to, what is it, remote signed.
Another thing that could also be is if you download the file, unlock the file.
Yeah.
That'll kill it too sometimes. Yeah. It shouldn't rattle.
It's rattling a little.
Uh-oh. GG. Audio recorder? No, it's an audio recorder.
No.
Yeah, it's a solid state.
You think I'm gonna give him a spinning platter drive?
Yeah, it's just running his laptop.
I don't even like him in my laptop since my laptop has to move.
All right, so that is still giving me version 0.0. So this is what I'm going to do.
When you import a module, is it persistent across a root, or do you have to import it each time?
You have to import it every session.
Every session?
Yes.
Yes. So if you were to type in that PowerShell window, PowerShell, or if he closed that session, it wouldn't be available. That being said,
You can import.
yes, PowerShell, if the module is in one of those PS modules, one of the paths, it will auto import modules when you try to run a command from one of those modules.
Oh, okay.
So if your module's in a weird, funky place like SCCM does, it's not going to auto import it unless you have that path added into your your environment variable.
Or if you don't.
Yeah.
What happens if you import the module without removing it first? It doesn't add in the additional functions that are there?
You generally want to remove it first. Some people will say that if you do a force import, it will remove and then add.
Yeah.
But I've seen some instances where that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So best
You
practice,
just-
remove the module that's there, import the module again.
Right.
Well, if you don't remove it, you're not going to get the update.
Well, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
If you could just
That's why you say you can try the force, but
Yeah.
it is best to do dash remove and then
Yep.
dash import then.
All right. So let me go back and take a look at that PSM1 file. So you can see that once we actually set up a manifest for this, none of the functions are exported. Now there's a couple ways that we can do that. So let's actually go to this shell once. I'm just going to do a help export module member. Just going to do a full, because this will give you an idea of what exactly you can export. So you can export aliases, you can export commandlets, you can export functions, you can export variables. And obviously functions and variables are really like the two biggies, right? So if you have your own module and you're working within your own team, we have specific variables that we use. Whether it's globally or what have you, that just come in really handy to have. So once that module is imported, you have access to those variables. Again, so we can do it this way. We can export module members, and I'm just going to do the dash trick.
Would it?
What's up?
Nothing. Keep going.
It's important to note that when you're exporting variables, you're not exporting $var. You're just exporting the name of the variable itself. So no $signs on what you're exporting. Can you see that in the back? Okay. I'll blow it up a little. So we talked about verb, noun, function, names. I am way ahead of schedule.
I see that.
More time to mingle later.
Yeah, so I'll be around for a while after this. So if you guys have any questions or anything like that, we can talk about maybe what you're working on or how this applies to you. So this is essentially what we've been working on. We created a monolithic module. And I don't know if you guys saw this. I kind of did this on the sly. Let me take a look at the PSD1 file. So I came in here and I updated the module version. And that's one part of actually adding a version to the module. The other part is in the actual module folder where we had demo 80 module, I created a folder called 1.1.1. And that's all you got to do to apply a version to it. PowerShell 5 and up is going to look for a version folder. So for example, if I, well, that's not going to work to showcase what I'm talking about. But if I had another version of the module outside of those version folders, it would not load it. It would say, oh, I see you're using versions. I'm just going to load the module that's in your version folder and that's it. And it took me like 2 hours, and then finally talking to Paul to figure out why my latest module wasn't loading. And that's a Power 5 and above situation.
For versioning, does it have to be a certain syntax of 3 numbers? You know,
It
1.1,
doesn't have to be. I mean, there's some standards on that. I've seen some people use 4.
Yeah, most people prefer 4 numbers, but it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
You could have it literally be version 3, 4, you know, .8 or anything.
Right, it depends on how granular you want to get. and
Exactly.
What
Right.
major update or whatever.
Yeah, so, you know,
Right, and it's probably going to be different if you have a module with 10 functions in it versus 60. A lot of people, if they add a function, they'll add to the .1. If they do a bug fix, they'll add to the .1. If they make any like game breaking changes, they'll do the major release, so it'll go from 1 to 2.
Like, can you do like version 1 and 1A or something like that?
has to be numbers.
Really, you want to use hex? PowerShell.
Yeah. Yeah,
Using alt codes.
no, it does that.
Rollouts.
Can I throw in a tilde in the
Rollouts are good.
No, do not include the tilde. You just want to see chaos, don't you?
Okay. So I'm going to give you guys just a quick demo of what a non-monolithic module looks like, because right now all we have are our PSM1 files and PSD1 files, our manifest, and then our scripts module file. This I'm not going to run anything on here because this is a production server from work. But this is essentially what the PSM1 file is. You notice there's no functions in here. How can I blow that up a little bit? And I'll give you a look at what the file structure looks like. So here's the Access Admin module. You'll see we have a directory for classes, directory for functions. This is a public folder and a private folder, and the private folder is for all your private helper functions. In public, you'll have all the actual functions that are going in the module. So instead of having one file with 50 functions in it, you have 50 separate PS1 files. And essentially, by loading the module, you're essentially just dot sourcing the files into memory. It makes things. Do you guys have any questions there before I shut this down?
What's dot sourcing? That's a pretty big topic.
What is it? It's a way of just bringing something into memory. So instead of just loading it from one file, it's dot sourcing each file one by one. But the advantage, you have some performance boost there. Don't give me that look.
No, that looks for other things.
Okay. So you do get some performance increases because you're not loading all of that data at once. You can load it more granularly. We talked about pester testing 2 months ago. So you have a big advantage there. So you can just create tests for each separate PS1 file instead of having tests that have to run.
Yeah, another advantage of dot sourcing is usability. So if you have a function maybe that is used across multiple modules as you're developing it, instead of having to have a copy of that file out everywhere, you can pull a copy of that file in through dot sourcing to execute it into RAM. So that way you're not having multiple copies of the same file that potentially get out of version sync.
Yeah.
So if you have multiple functions and run that same thing.
It becomes a level of source control as well as a method to pull in what you need where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you think about also how we update code, if we have a module has like 10,000 lines of code in it, and we just need to update one function to fix a bug, you don't have to search through lines and lines of diffs to figure out what was updated. You can just see this file was updated from the last version. So it makes maintenance a lot easier as well.
And readability.
Sure.
Better than one long file.
Right.
Each function is its own PS1.
Right. Any questions?
I'll add one thing about performance, unless you want to talk about that, about monolithic versus non-monolithic.
Go ahead.
For the most part, non-monolithic modules are faster when loading, except if you sign your scripts. Because if you sign your scripts in your environment, it forces a signature on the scripts. That means every file has to be signed and checked. In that case, monolithic is faster for loading. Yeah, you're loading one file as opposed to 50, 60.
What's the, if you
75.
time that, how major of an impact is it on importing modules? Is it like make or break that,
It's noticeable.
like 5 minutes noticeable?
Not
an
5
hour?
minutes.
So the idea is that you get used to running those commands, right? And you can you can tab complete them like as you go kind of thing. And if you're talking about that measure of a hit, that would be noticeable.
Or to tab completed and then you wait forever for it to import
Right.
it into memory. Yeah,
Right.
I can see that. Okay. Yeah, fair.
Man, that's all I got. So, I mean, if there's nothing, I'm going to stick around. I'm definitely going to have some pizza. So if you guys have any questions, hit me up. But thanks for coming. I think we had 12 attendees, and I think this is the first time we had,
The actual number show up?
and then some. So yeah, thanks for coming out. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Cheers.
Okay, so sorry, I forgot to actually show you guys how you should be exporting your functions. In the manifest, there's an option called function to export. You would just list your functions this way. So instead of typing export module number at the bottom of your PSM1 file, this is a much more efficient way to do that.
Okay. Cool. Well, once again, given the catalog you kind of showed us, like you have an extensive set of PS1s.
Yeah.
This would make much more sense because you guys have developed those over time.
Right.
Versus having onesie twosie.
Yeah, so I'll actually showcase Sapien a little bit because they pay for our pizza every month. So you can actually import your module as a project, and you can just go through each file one by one, check the properties. See, and I can see even right now that this isn't being exported. If I change that to true and save this, it'll actually update the manifest file. So I don't even have to go in and make that update. So, go Sapien. It's a really good product.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, now I'm officially done.
Until he remembers the next time.